So I have some ground rules when people come to see me for counseling. And in terms of those ground rules, one of them is no yelling and screaming, no cutting the other person off, no calling a person a liar if you didn't like what they had to say or it doesn't reflect your point of view. So a couple of weeks ago, I met with a couple and talk about yelling. His voice was, shall we say, loud. He was yelling and screaming in the context of talking and working things out in front of me. And so I intervened. I said, you know, not good. Like, let's stop. And I made it clear that can't go on in front of me, that yelling and screaming. This is a couple who had been to a previous counselor. And I said, like, did this happen with the previous counselor? And they said, yes, it did. I said, well, what did the previous counselor do? And they said the previous counselor did nothing, but if it got too bad, I was told to take a break. The husband was told to take a break. I said, the counselor didn't give you any feedback that yelling, that screaming wasn't appropriate, that was an issue, and no, wasn't told. So, I made it abundantly clear that when you're yelling and screaming, your partner isn't going to hear you better. They're going to hear you, in a sense, worse. Anyways, and it's not that the other partner, the wife in this instance, didn't have her own issues. She would talk in general terms and she would inadvertently put him down, demean him by saying, he always does this, he always does that. And that would get his goat. So anyways, we worked on these things. They came back to see me a week later. It was incredible. I always ask people, what percolated would you get out of our first meeting? And he very spontaneously said, I couldn't believe the look on your face when I started yelling and screaming and that you told me that was too loud. It says, because, what we did here the week before, that's nothing compared to the way we shout at home. I thought, holy mackerel. So, how are things different, the result of that meeting? Says, well, I barely shout anymore. And she confirmed that. And she's also not talking in all these general terms. You always do this, you always do that. How's the relationship? And they both looked calm. They both looked peaceful. They're getting along. And they have 2 young children. In my experience, when parents make these kinds of changes, we often see the changes reflected in the kids. So, I went there. I said, how are the kids with these changes? Have you noticed anything different? And they both said that, yeah, their older child, the other one's an infant, the older child is calling out for daddy more, wanting to spend more time with daddy. Now, dad said, I think he's doing that maybe because he was jealous of the little one. I said, no, 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 no. That's too much change in too short a time. This has to do with this child no longer being afraid of you. And it was like, so listen, yelling and screaming, name calling, carrying on, cutting the other person off. These are not behaviors that will ever bode well in a marriage, in a relationship. So if you want to get along better, you have to manage your own triggers. You have to not get louder in order to be heard. And in fact, sometimes it's helpful to go softer to be heard. And on the flip side, be mindful if you're provoking your partner, like, why are you doing that? Where are you going with that? Is that really helpful? So both sides do have to make some changes. And it's amazing what happens when people take responsibility. I was so thrilled catching up with this couple and hearing how they legitimately each took responsibility for their respective contribution to distress and have legitimately worked on changing it. I thought I would just share that with you. I'm Gary Direnfeld. I'm a social worker, yoursocialworker.com. Bye now.